Welcome to Stay in the Fight, a podcast by and for American veterans. I'm your host, David, and the intent for these episodes is to talk to veterans from all walks and to share their stories without a script or agenda. I'll be talking to men and women across all branches and jobs, from the Korean War era through the Global War on Terror era. We'll cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of war, service, and transition, with a focus on what it takes to stay in the fight. Hello, and welcome to the Stay in the Fight podcast, where we share stories of American veterans and service members. I'm your host, David, and today we're going to be talking to Scott Mechkowski, an Army veteran and retiring father. We'll cover some war stories, some ICE stories from when he worked with them, which is what it means to be a father in today's world. Scott, thanks for talking to me today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, would you mind introducing kind of yourself, your background, where you've been, what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I'm married. I've been married to my wife now for 39 years. We got married. We were high school sweethearts. So we got married in 1986. We're still together. We have three boys. And my boys are 30, 26, and 21. And I did 38 years, both active and reserve component Army. Retired as a command sergeant major for the 44th IBCT. And part of that time in the National Guard, I worked for it was Immigration Naturalization Service, which morphed into ICE in 2003 after the 9/11 attacks. They took customs and immigration, merged them into one. And I worked for a branch called Enforcement Removal Operations. And I was a quote unquote deportation officer, but we're nice now, right? So it's called the removal officer. Okay. We don't deport people anymore. So I did that, and then I rose up the ranks. I started off in Newark, New Jersey. And I did a couple stints at the academy down in Glencoe, Georgia as an instructor, some stints down in Washington, D.C. As an acting chief of fugitive operations. And I got promoted to New York City as a supervisor, and I retired December 31st of 2018 as the deputy field office director in New York City. And that's my story.
You've been everywhere, done a little bit of everything, huh?
Did a little bit of everything. I dabbled.
Yeah. When did you join the Army?
I joined the Army July of 1984. Did my basic training at Fort Bliss, Texas. And my first duty station was Schofield Barracks, Hawaii.
That's wild. So you joined, to date yourself. You joined before I was born, man.
Thank you. Thank you. It's hard when you have to start putting your date of birth in like these websites and you're scrolling to 1965. Yeah. It seems like an eternity getting there.
And you were married the whole time?
Yeah, I got married. Laura and I, my wife, Laura, we went to high school together, and I fell in love, and the rest is a fairy tale. You know what I mean?
I'm married to my high school sweetheart as well.
That's awesome.
I know it's a tough thing in the military. I think probably very rare, I think, that dudes are sticking longer than 5-10 years. I feel like everyone I know is divorced.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like there was a point when I was on active duty. I ETS'd from Schofield Barracks to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and she came down to Fort Polk, and back at the time the 5th Infantry Division, man, mechanized was a different place. And so just to tell you a quick funny thing about that, here I am, I married this girl from New Jersey, and I bring her down to Louisiana. We're in like no man's land in Louisiana. And we got back from our honeymoon. The night we got back, the next morning, 0400, I had to go to the field for 3 weeks. I basically left her home and said, I'll see you in 3 weeks. And, she didn't know anything about like down south. You have to pump your own gas. Like here, they do it for you, right?
Right.
So we kicked off our marriage with a bang. You know what I mean?
Well, it teaches you to depend on each other. That's for sure. You either split or you learn to depend on each other.
Yeah, there came a point though on active duty where my wife wanted to pursue her dreams, you know what I mean? And she went to college to be, a biolab tech. And, it's hard to get a job in the military for a spouse, especially back in the 80s. Nowadays it's a little different because there's different programs, but I thought it was selfish. She was letting me pursue my dreams, right? She came down there, and so I knew that the military was part of me and I wanted to maintain it. But I also wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to serve in law enforcement. So
Mhm.
I made the decision to ETS from there, and I went and I came back home.
And home is where exactly? Where you at?
New Jersey, New Jersey.
New Jersey. So you know what's going on with the drones right now, or what?
Yeah, there's like 50 web pages up here of all conspiracy theories about the mothership off the coast of Seaside. And,
Yeah.
yeah, my Ring camera goes off 50 times a night now with people saying there's drones all over the place. It's like a helicopter, it's a plane, but whatever.
Okay. Well, talk me through kind of your military career. So you came in and out, you went guard. I mean,
Yeah, so like, when I got to Hawaii, man, I was like lock, stock, the barrel. I had a pretty tough upbringing in the sense that my mom was so I'm adopted, right? I'm adopted. My adopted mother is Puerto Rican and my adopted father is Polish, hence the last name Mechkowski. Um, and so, growing up, man, my mother was kind of like she was very on top of everything. And so, I graduated high school and I went to college. I got a scholarship to play basketball. And I came home one day from my basketball practice at college, and my mother says to me, you got to start getting a job. You have to work. Like you're living in my house now. You're 18. You're a man. Um, and like this went on for a couple weeks. And, I didn't have a degree, right? I just started college and I'm thinking like, what am I going to do? And so in this conversation with her, she said, you need to grow up. I said, all right, mom. The next day I went down to the recruiter. I signed up. I was like, sign me up and can I ship out within 30 days? Because I think my mom's going to kick me out of the house. And they were like, yeah, sure. And that was the story. When I came home and told her, she didn't believe it. She's like, you're going to be home within 2 weeks. Don't worry. Turned out I never came home.
careful what you wish for, mom, right?
Yeah, but she was awesome though. Like, she motivated me. I know it's crazy, but I guess I'm one of them guys that didn't have to go into the military. There's plenty of us, right? But if you're talking about I wasn't a bad student, I was a good student. I had good grades. I grew up in the suburbs. Um, and everything was pretty cool, right? It's just her demands. I wasn't going to be able to be school and athlete and then, work at the same time. It was just going to be too much. So um, I appreciate her for that because it turned out well. So
Yeah. So you land in Schofield for your first duty station
yeah, I
right in
actually
the
got
'80s.
I was able to pick it. That was the great part. And I got a bonus. I got a bonus for going there. It was like $10,000 they gave me for taking this MOS. And I went to I was an air defense artillery guy. And they said, hey, if you take this MOS, you get $10,000. Oh, and by the way, you get to pick your duty station. And I said, well, what are my options? And they said, well, it's Korea, Germany, Hawaii. And then I was like, stop,
Easy.
stop, easy, Hawaii. So, that was it. I knew where I was going right from basic training. So,
Were you already married when you left? You get like married right away, or you get
no,
married?
no, no. I got married. I graduated high school in '83, so I'm going to date myself even more, right? Laura and I graduated in '83, and I went to basic in July of '84.
What
So I
did
was
you,
home
what
for like 9 months.
what did you blow that 10 grand on when you got to Hawaii?
I blew through that thing so fast. I mean, yeah, I bought a TV. You know what I mean? I bought like clothes and
Yeah.
It's why he wasn't cheap, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I've heard. So then you go down to Fort Polk, you drag your wife with you. She wants to pursue her own path, her own career, and you decide to ETS so you can kind of facilitate that and help her. You guys ended up back in
Yeah.
Jersey. And then from
Yes.
then, is
Yeah.
that where you got in the guard?
So it's interesting, right? Because the army does everything sometimes. It's crazy, right? When I was getting out, I had to go see a recruiter, in the army, the active duty guy before it was part of your checklist to get out, right? You had to go see the retention. I'm sorry, not recruiter,
Yeah.
retention. So the guy says to me, well, at this point, my MOS had changed from air defense artillery to military policeman. That's another story, right? But um, I be I was a bonus baby, and I wasn't really allowed to change my MOS because I got paid for 4 years, right? And 2 years, 2.5 years into it, I wound up becoming runner-up soldier of the year at Fort Polk, Louisiana. So they came up to me and said, "Hey, you know, there's really no prize or whatever, but hey, listen, there's some MOSs that have shortages and will allow you to change your MOS under the Bear program without penalty if you want to." And I knew I wanted to become a police officer at home. So what does a 20-year-old kid do? Like, yeah, I want to be a military policeman.
Mhm.
So they sent me to school. I went to school at Fort McClellan, came back to Fort Polk as a military policeman. And then like right after that, the Cuban crisis kicks off at Atlanta prison and Oakdale prison. And Oakdale was literally like maybe 45 minutes north of Fort Polk. And we wound up having to secure all these Cubans at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And I did that every night. It was just guard duty.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, I said to the guy, well, I want to go into the reserves. And the guy says, I got a spot for you, Fort Totten, New York. Says, great. It's an E5 spot. I said, that's even better. So APS, I came home. At first drill, I showed up at Fort Totten, and these people looked at me like I was crazy. They're like,
Where?
there's no spot here. Yeah, Fort Totten, New York.
Oh,
It's in
okay.
New York. So I said, well, I got orders. Like, look, this is my stuff. It says Fort Totten. And the guy's like, there's no MPs here. Said, what do you want me to do? The guy goes, I don't know, go home. I said, okay.
Damn.
So I went home. And and then I got in touch with a recruiter here in New Jersey, and it was a National Guard computer. I mean recruiter. And he says, what are you looking to do? I said, anything. Just get me in. Because the Gulf War had started. And at the time it was 1990, and I'm like, yeah, put me in. So I went in.
Did you get over to the Gulf?
No, so I missed that by like literally months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so but I went to this MP company in New Jersey, and they disbanded. So when they disbanded, they said you have to get another MOS. And I said, okay, what do we have? And they're like, tanks. Sign me up. So I became an M1 tanker.
It's like your third MOS in 4 years.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. But I did a little bit of everything. So I wound up with like 4 MOSs. I became a scout. They got rid of the armor, and I had to transition into becoming a scout. So I got a 19 Zulu and a 19 Delta MOS as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. I just listening to going being sent all these places and people just kind of being like, hey, go home and hey, you want to come into the guard? Hey, be a tanker. I can't imagine that kind of army now. Everything's so controlled now that someone shows up somewhere like you're locked in.
Yeah. I mean, think about this too, right? We didn't have computers. Like they did have a computer in the army, that big ones. They were like a tower with the
Yeah.
green, the green font. It was block
Mhm.
font, and they printed out something on an analog printer and gave it to you. Like we didn't have access to computers. So, I don't know where they got the line of paragraph number from for Fort Totten, but they gave it to me. So I was like, whatever. Yeah.
So it's probably what, 90, early 90s. You're a tanker now. What do you do
Yeah.
in the 90s then? Are you working kind of
So,
you work in the civilian sector as a police officer as well?
so it's funny, right? The military in New Jersey, well, in every state, they have what they call a counter drug program, right? And so what happened was when I joined the Guard, they looked at my background and said, "Hey, man, like, would you be interested in working with us on active duty, and supporting a three-letter agency?" And I was like,
Hell yeah.
"Does I said, what does it pay? Like, what does it pay?" And they said, well, they said you get paid your rank and you get your BAH and BA. Sign me up. So I signed up and I got assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration in Newark, and I wound up like working in Newark with the DEA for like 4.5 years. And but at that time, right, law enforcement was pretty crazy. It was really, really hard. Like nobody was hiring. It was like there was a point from like 92 to like 96 that like if you got a job in law enforcement, you hit the lottery, especially like in New Jersey. It was really hard. So agencies didn't hire for like a year and a half. And when they opened the window, it shut right away. I mean, you know, I applied for a job with DEA at one point, and they had 22,000 applications like in the first day.
What was going on? Why was it so competitive?
Everybody wanted a job. I mean, look, when the economy is not really good, right? That's when everybody wants the government jobs, right? When the economy is good, these people, they care less. But like right now in New Jersey, if you want to be a state trooper, which was like a coveted job in law enforcement in New Jersey, they actually have announcements on the turnpike, like, want to become a state trooper. They never did stuff like that. Like they never even had to advertise.
Hmm.
And they they got like 5,000 people applying now if they get that
Hmm.
for a job, and it's nobody wants to be in law enforcement anymore. But I did that for 4 years, and I was applying everywhere. And sure enough, as I applied for INS. No, I applied for DEA, and they weren't hiring. So the SAC at DEA went to the SAC of immigration and said, "I got this guy, man. Like we want him. You know, I think you should take this guy. Someone's gonna scoop him up." And I never forget the guy from immigration calling me saying, "Well, if you're so good, why don't they take you?" And I said, "I don't think they're hiring." And they said, "Okay, well, come in for an interview." And I went in for an interview, and on the spot, they offered me the job, and that's how it all became INS. I didn't know anything about INS. You know what I mean? I just knew about drugs.
So what was your day to day then? For several years, you're working for INS doing what? Like,
So it was funny, right? My position was really weird. Everybody thought I was regular DEA agent. I did everything they did. It was the funniest thing. Like I was supposed to coordinate like shipments. Like say we got like a shipment of drugs through the border down in Texas, and it was like on a tractor trailer, and its destination, let's just say, was Queens, New York. Well, my job was to get like a C5 or a plane to fly down there, pick up the tractor trailer, put it on the plane, fly it here, and then logistically get the dope. And we would rig the dope up, the truck and everything, make the delivery, and the agents would make arrests. So we did things like that. We did things like help them with putting up pole cameras. We did techie stuff for them. I worked in a group analyzing, doing casework. I worked on wiretaps. I did like there were times I was doing surveillance. So like there was nobody knew the rules basically.
the
So
Wild West.
yeah. So it was great. And those guys they were awesome, man. They loved the military guys, man. And nowadays we provide a lot of analysts to these types of agencies like the FBI, the DEA. so many different agencies have a military liaison person there, but the rules are more defined on what they do than they were when it first started.
Sure. And you're doing this on one hand, and then you're also kind of navigating your way through the ecosystem and the guard still.
Yeah, the guard thing was kind of funny, right? Coming from active duty to this unit I went to, it was like F troop. You know what I mean? Like I showed up and I had people saying, "Dude, like, where did you come from?" And I'm like, "Came from active duty." It took me about, you know, 3 months to get used to it, I guess, and then I just accepted it.
You
Like,
just do you mean like it was just everyone was just kind of doing their own thing, no
yeah,
rules,
yeah,
barely show up.
I showed up to go to the field. We were going to the field for a weekend, Friday to Sunday, whatever it was. And these guys are packing coolers on the back of the Jeep, and they're like, "Hey, Tom, you got that 6 pack? I put it over here on ice." And I'm looking around like they got beer? Like, are you fucking kidding me? And yeah, it was like a party. Like they would go out to the field, and at night there was campfires and I'm like, this isn't real life, man. I never had this happen before in active duty.
I,
So yeah.
I had an old boss who was in the guard. I won't say where, and I won't name him, but he basically told me that he did 20 years in the guard. He said every time they went to the field, it was just grilling and drinking beer, and that included their 2 weeker that they did every year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wild stuff.
New Jersey wasn't that bad, right? I mean, we actually did army stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as the years went on, right? Like it was probably maybe a year or two, and then everything started to change. There was a shift where we go to the field and we did a lot of training, especially when I got to the Cav. When I left the MP company and went to the Cav, I mean, our weekends were like tanks, firing, shooting, just maneuvering, it was nonstop. So, you know, that changed because they gave us this equipment, right? We were going to use it. It didn't sit in the motor pool.
Mm.
So with that comes a lot of maintenance. So our weekends were like Muta fours, fives every weekend, just shooting and repairing.
And then you're probably, I don't know, I can't, I'm trying to do the math now, but were you a staff sergeant by the time 9/11 happens?
I Yeah, no, I think I was a E7 already when 9/11 happened, right? And I was working when 9/11 happened, I was working as what they call an interactor at the battle lab where like we would host army units and do war games for them, right? So I
Yeah.
was like an interactor where like we had a red cell and the blue cell, and then these units would come in and we would have this thing mapped out like Atropia, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm a veteran of the Atropia War for like 30 years, you know what I mean? But that's where it all started, and we would do things like that, and and we had all kinds of different units from different states come in, and we would do this. Um, and then it got old for me, right? Because I wasn't interacting with troops anymore.
Yeah.
And it's E7, I was like, look, man, I should be a platoon sergeant out on the line, like doing platoon daddy stuff. And I begged them, I'm like, hey man, can you please let me go back to the Cav? And New Jersey, I call it like the mafia. You got to kiss the ring. They were
Mm.
like, oh, we can't lose you because, we're shorthanded. And it just turns out, it's funny that you asked me this, right? Um, yeah, they denied my request to go back to the field for like 2 more years. So I was there till like 2000 and I don't know, I want to say 2005, maybe I was there till.
Mm.
Yeah.
On the law enforcement side, did things take a pretty drastic shift after 9/11 too?
Yeah, I was so busy that it's funny. I'm glad you asked me that because what a lot of people in the regular army don't realize is they get up and they're focused on like, okay, this is their stuff, same uniform every day, boots, right? Like, hey, I'm going to the same place, I'm doing the same thing. When this 9/11 happened, man, my world in immigration was upside down. I was doing the Pentagon investigation. I was on the street every day. We were looking for, you figure it was our job to interview. We had to go find like these males from 18 to 35 years old from like 33 countries and start interviewing people about the terrorist attacks.
Mhm.
And, you know, I was so busy at the time where, you know, I forget to call troops and let them know about drill. And then like I'd have a troop call me and say, "Hey, Sergeant, by the way, we got drill this week." And I'm like, "Oh, shit."
Mhm.
I was flying all over the world. I mean, taking guys from like here to like Algeria. Well, I didn't go to Algeria, but I went to like, London to like Africa. Then you drop them off and then you kind of come home. We were deporting people at a fast and furious pace at that time. So there was a point where I was going to get out of the guard. I was just going to quit. I couldn't take it no more. So, um, I did get an NC. I did get a bad evaluation. They did hit me for missing too many drills. So I basically was just going to hang it up.
How was the family surviving during this time? You got to have at least one of your boys by now, right?
Well, so by that time I had two, right? I had one in 95 and one in 99. So, they were young, man. They were really young. Mom did a really great job of holding it down, right? So, and that was the other thing, by the time I'd come home, I was exhausted. I mean, I was running with all these other three-letter agencies running around. At the time it was still like customs and it was still DEA and all of this stuff had a nexus and the FBI. And at the time, I don't know if you remember the big anthrax scare.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we were running down anthrax. I mean, Robbinsville, New Jersey, the big post office, that's where they found all of this stuff and everything was linked to Jersey City. And
Was it real anthrax?
yeah, yeah, the post office was shut down for a long time. But um, I would say to you that it's really hard, right? Because like I made my bread and butter working for, not the guard at the time. I was only a traditional guardsman going one weekend a month. So, if they said, "Hey, you got to fly to, Liberia, I mean, to like say Ghana, or you got to go to Colombia or DR, wherever I had to go." That there wasn't like, "Oh yeah, no, I can't do it." Like I can't do it. No, everybody was doing it. So, you know,
You're having to escort folks out of the country.
yeah, so the bad ones, the really bad ones, anybody that was like really a serious public threat, we did. So, um,
How do you
but
determine that?
based on their criminality, right? So, like, if it was like an aggravated assault, rapes, stuff like that. I
Mhm.
mean, if there was like minor drug offenses and stuff like that, we would just, verify they were on the plane. It was a nonstop flight to their country. We'd notify the country that they're coming back, whatever. But anybody that was a public threat, serious threat, we escorted back.
You ever roll up a guy more than once?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. That's different. That's a different story. Yeah.
Okay. So after you did your 2 years, kind of running that blue and red cell operation, training up the active duty troops, what'd you get into after that?
It's funny. It's funny. They sent me to school to become a small group instructor at the academy. So I did. I went to school. I took this course, and then the geniuses in New Jersey figured out that hey, we have a schoolhouse, a regional training institute, right? RTI, and they the big army gave them the opportunity to run MOSQ for 95 Bravos, which were at military police. And at the time, a lot of guys in New Jersey were going to Iraq
Okay.
and they were going as military policemen. So they needed to like train these dudes as MPs before they went overseas. So they got the schoolhouse, and the only problem was there wasn't another guy in the state of New Jersey who had the minimum criteria to be an instructor and to start the program. So they called me and asked me to do it. I was like, yeah, hell yeah, like that'd be great, you know. So I did, and I spent like an entire year of just getting everything. You have no idea how intense it is to get like certified to run at the schoolhouse like an MOSQ, right?
Right.
And I had to go get murder boarded. It was all kinds of stuff. So I did that, and I got DA approval from the military schoolhouse to run the course. We went into ATARs, and next thing you know, people were coming to New Jersey for military police school. And right after the first class, I got a phone call from some sergeant major, and he said, "Hey, um, listen, there's promotion opportunity here." I said, "Really?" I thought they were going to make me like the commandant of the schoolhouse, and they said, "No, we're looking for an operations sergeant major to go to Iraq with the MP company,
Mm.
the 328." And I said, "What? You mean a master sergeant?" And they're like, "Yeah, we get promoted." And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." So
Sign me up.
I took that, and I wound up going to the MP company, and I deployed with them as an operations sergeant at E8.
Is that like your first? So that's pretty much your first deployment now into the GWOT, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, like I was other places, but it wouldn't be considered a deployment because of the time constraints, right? But this was definitely the first one with the New Jersey Guard, and we wound up going to Iraq, and I wound up at Camp Cropper, of all places.
Where's that?
It's right outside of Baghdad. It's one of the detention facilities. There was Camp Buka in the south. There was Cropper up in the north. With Taji was a little higher than,
Okay.
and yeah, that's a pretty funny story, man. So I get promoted to E8. I go with this MP company, and when I got to Kuwait, somebody found out that I had experience in detention operations. And so this guy starts like Q&A me, and I said, "Well, yeah." He's like, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Well, I'm an assistant field office director with ICE in New York City." And the guy goes, "That sounds impressive." And I said, "Well, no, not really. I mean, like, whatever." I'm like, "It's my job." And he says, "Is that a GS job?" And I says, "Yeah." He goes, "What level?" And I said, "Well, I'm a GS 14." And the guy says, "You're not a GS 14." I says, "I'm not." I'm like, "Okay." He said, "Are you really a GS 14?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a GS 14." He says, "But can you look? I need to see something." I said, "All right, hold on a minute." So I said, "Let me go to a computer," and go to a computer. I print out the stuff and I give it to him, and I'm like, "Here, see?" And he's like, "Oh my God, man, you're a master sergeant." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah." I'm a master sergeant, and I'm a GS 14. So he looked at my resume and they said, "You're going to work for us directly." So I worked for Task Force 131, and I wound up being assigned to like as a theater internment facility NCOIC. So I was like in charge of like all the and well, I wasn't in charge of anything, but the facility director was a general, and I was kind of like his right hand man. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I ran the TIF, what they call the TIF.
What's that?
So
That's the theater
theater
internment
internment
facility.
facility. Yeah. So
Okay.
anybody that was locked up, they would come through, and the tier one guys would make these arrests and whatever, and they would bring these guys down into Camp Cropper where we classified. They would get interviewed, whatever, and and then they were staged there. Like we had a compound five was a where like Chemical Ali was housed. Like we broke down different we had different pods for different groups of people.
Mhm.
And every once in a while we would transfer out, let's just say like 360 of our guys down to like Buka, and we would take 180 back, vice versa. So it was a really cool experience. Like all of these guys that are now like, the active Taliban or, were like at Camp Cropper when I was there. Like I know them, like they were in the Compound 3, I know them. And I'm like, you know, they were broken up into different groups, right? But the gist was I never did operational stuff for the MP company I deployed with because I wasn't assigned to them.
Yeah.
So
Were you in country when the Abu Ghraib story broke?
we got there right after that, right? And that was really that was crazy because the general that got stuck cleaning that up was General Quantock. I don't know if you know, he wound up, General Quantock. I think he retired as a 3-star, but yeah, he was there for like 5 years cleaning that mess up. So when he saw these National Guard guys from New Jersey come in, he wasn't like happy, to tell you the truth. Like, yeah, he was like, oh my God, like, but we grew on him, you know what I mean? Because I think it was the Guard unit out of New York that was involved in Abu Ghraib.
I don't know. I don't remember the story. I was too young really to remember, but
Yeah, it was like the 200th MP battalion or something like that, but it was New York. Yeah.
hmm.
So here we were from Jersey, and
Yeah, to
we
anyone
weren't
who's not
really,
from there, it's all the same. New Jersey, New York, up on the West Coast, it's the same.
it's
What-
bada bing or bada boom,
Yeah.
it don't matter, right? Yeah.
So how long did
So
you do there before you came back to the States?
so we were there for a year, we did the normal tour, we came back home. That experience was great, right? Like it was a great experience for me. But I mean, if you talk to the lower enlisted guys, they had to walk on the catwalks, they were guards, there's not they didn't sign up for that, right? They signed up to do real stuff.
Yeah.
Infantry guys want to do infantry stuff, right? Cav guys want to do cav stuff. And here we are as an element, was 2,200 of us deployed. And I'd say like 2,000 of us wound up doing detention operations in theater,
Mhm.
but somebody had to do it.
Well, you returned back to the States. You just jump right back into
Yeah.
your ICE
And then,
job.
yeah, it was funny. When I got back, my boss says, "Oh, so how was it?" I'm like, I don't have to talk about it. And then he said, "Well, you know what, Scott, man, listen, I really need help at this detention facility that we own, like we operate." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Why don't you go there? Let me know what you want to do, but I could use you there for like 6 months." And I came back home, and that's what I did. I did it for 6 months, and then he moved me into training. So it was great. It was a great experience. Yeah,
Your family at this point is starting to, I don't know, feel stressed out at all.
you
Did you ever
know,
get to the point where you started thinking, man, I don't know how much longer I can be away from them. I don't know, 7-day weeks and 20-hour
yeah,
days.
it wears on you, right? But like I go back to having a supportive wife, right? Like, that's there's so many sacrifices made, right, by the spouses and the kids, but you're in your own little thing here. You know what I mean? Like I was a master sergeant, right? When I come home, first thing when I got off the plane, there was two sergeant majors waiting for me in New Jersey, the state sergeant major and a brigade sergeant major. And they were like, "Hey, congratulations, you're going to be the first sergeant in the cab. You're going back to the cab. I need you to go to B troop." And I said, "I'm not even home yet, man. I haven't out processed." Um, and they're like, I think that's every so enlisted guy, like who doesn't want to be a first sergeant, right? They
Yeah.
dangle that carrot and you're like, "Yo, that'd be pretty cool. I'll do that for 2 years." So I told my wife, "We're not going to deploy no more. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to be a first sergeant, and that morphs into that. Next thing you know, you're an operations sergeant major, and then you're the CSM of the squadron, then you're the brigade sergeant. It's crazy. It's just crazy how it all worked out, you know.
Did you
But
get that first sergeant gig?
yeah, and it was awesome.
You said sign me up again, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, it was an awesome gig, man. I had great soldiers, man. The soldiers were locked on. I mean, one thing about people in New Jersey, and I'll tell you this, right? They're probably not the best garrison soldiers out there, right? Like, Like anytime my units were like in garrison, stuff would go sideways, right? But you put them in the field and it was like magic. It was like somebody took pixie dust and threw it, and you're like, we had First Army guys come evaluate us at, XCTC, and they're like, yo, these I put these guys up against anybody. And I was, and I would tell the instructors out there, like, listen, these guys, they live for this stuff. You know what I mean? Like they live for this. I don't know what it is. I go, but if you evaluate us on the garrison side, we'd fail miserably. And he started laughing. He's like, whatever. So I was thankful for the soldiers that I had. It was work, but they were great.
And soldiers want to do soldier stuff, not only sitting rotting in the motor pool and doing paperwork.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are all guys. Look, man, a lot of guys I had too were from the inner city,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I had some guys from the suburbs, right? Don't get me wrong, but them kids from the inner city, man, they were just itching to train. Like, if you paid attention to them and gave them opportunities, they excelled. And that was a lesson I learned that, like, as a platoon sergeant, a master sergeant. So when I became the first sergeant, I used to tell the commander, like, look, let's go to the field. We have to be in the field 9 out of the 12 months. Christmas party month, December, nobody wants to go. November, everybody was like Thanksgiving / SRP type stuff. And then like when you went to do 3-week AT, usually the next month you didn't drill because there was a lapse, right? So the other 9 months we were in the field.
Yeah.
So we didn't really home station.
Well, I'm sure a lot of dudes thank you for that.
Yeah, they did, but yeah, that's good and bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That some stuff's a necessary evil, right?
Mm-hmm. And how'd they bamboozle you into becoming the CSM?
We had an ops sergeant major, and the operations sergeant major was an SF guy, like, active duty, all the 9 yards, right? One day the guy walked into the damn squadron, man. He was going through transition surgery and told him, like, my name's no longer Jim, it's Jennifer. And they were like, what do we do? Like, I'm going back to like 2012, man. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like, we didn't even talk about this stuff back then, right?
Sure.
So nobody knew what to do. Like, what do you mean? Like, we can't have a female in the cav. And they called me up and they're like, listen, congratulations, you're now the ops sergeant major.
You're up next.
I was like, what are you talking about, man? I've only been a first sergeant for like, I was a first sergeant for like 3 years.
Mm.
And they're like, yeah, no. They said the sergeant major decided that they were going to switch paths in their life, and so they can no longer serve. And we have an opening. You're number one on the list, and that's how I became the ops sergeant major.
All right. And
Great.
you just got the command build after that too, huh?
Yeah, what happened was
Right.
we went down to we actually went to XC. Yeah, we were down there as an operations sergeant major for maybe 5 minutes. And we went down and we were doing some training, and sergeant major had a problem. And they decided at that point they were going to cut sling with him. And they said, now you're the CSM. So I got promoted to ops sergeant major 3 months later. Here I am, the CSM of the damn squadron. And I stayed there for 4 years before I went to the brigade.
You do any more deployments with them?
So I wound up going to Kosovo with the as the brigade sergeant. Funny, man, I left the squadron, and as soon as I get down, I promised my wife, right? At this point, my wife's like, look, man,
Get it together.
enough's enough, man.
Yeah.
Like, so I get approached at AT, and they're like, hey, Sergeant Major, listen, man, you've been selected for an MSC command, and you're going to be the brigade sergeant major. And I was like, no way. And they were like, yeah, congratulations. There was a board, and I finished number one on the board, and my first choice was the brigade. And so they gave me the brigade, and I was like, this is great, man. So I go home, I tell my wife, look, I promise you, promise. This is it. I'll just do brigade time and then I'm out. Okay. And so soon as I get into the brigade position, man, boom, Hurricane Maria hits, devastates Puerto Rico. Who gets sent? The 44th IBCT. So I'm there for like 68 days in Puerto Rico.
Jeez.
Yeah. We were like the command cell for the recovery effort. So there was active duty. My commander was the dual status commander for the whole operation. So I get to Puerto Rico, and this general comes up and says, "You're going to be Task Force Maria Sergeant Major." So now I wasn't even the 44th Sergeant Major anymore. I was the task force guy. So there was like General Buchanan, who was the 3-star, and his Sergeant Major were there. And then it was just me and this 1-star that were underneath him. So we did that. I come home from that. My wife's like 68 days, da, and I don't worry, baby, everything's good. The next month, I get called in, and they're like, "We got a NOS," and I'm like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, man, we have to go to Fort Bliss. Something came up." I fly to Fort Bliss, and they're like, "Yeah, you guys are going to Kosovo. Oh, by the way, the rest of the brigade's going to Djibouti, to the Horn of Africa. They're going to Somalia, and 68 of you are going to Kosovo." I'm like, I look at the commander, and I'm like, "Listen to me. Whatever you do, you can't speak this to nobody. Don't tell your wife. Don't tell nobody. We're gonna have to tell the troops, right? But like, so I come home and everybody knows except my wife
Wow,
and
man.
his wife. And I kept it quiet. And I'm like, I'm trying to break it to her, right? And I'm like, maybe they'll off ramp us. So I'm not gonna say nothing to get her excited. You know what I mean? And I'll never forget it. We were going in April, so it's got to be September, October time frame the next year, right? And there was a change of command. There was a change of command, right? And we're at the change of command, and the outbound brigade commander standing up there, and I'm on the stage with the state sergeant major and the brigade sergeant major. And next thing you know, man, the guy looks over and goes, and I got all the confidence in the world in Rob and Scott. They're going to do a great job, right? And
Uh,
look, there's my wife right in front of me with my kids. And I'm like, you gotta be shitting me, man. So the
for
ceremony
your
was
cover.
yeah, ceremony was over. I'm on the stage. I'm like, "Sorry, Major, sorry, Majors." My wife's looking at me. He goes, "Dude, she's staring right at you, man. Like I'm gonna exit stage left really quick, right?" And as soon as I got up, she came over. She's like, "Scott." I'm like, "I swear it wasn't planned." And so I made the promise. I said, "This is it." I'm like, "Babe, this is it." And it was. It was the last deployment. So
You hung it up after Kosovo.
I did. I came back home and I got stuck with COVID for two years on active duty. Like I came home from there. I was with Patrick. I had some regular duty guys, and we left there like March 18th.
Mhm.
When we got back home, everybody was on lockdown.
Yeah.
So I get a call from the state sergeant major and the tag, and they're like, "Hey, when do you guys come off a leave?" And I'm like, "I don't come off a leave until like May 25th." And the tag says, "Well, May 1st, you and the commander you're on Title 10 orders now. You're going to put you on Title 10. You're going to run the COVID response for New Jersey." So me and the commander ran that for 2 years on active duty. But I was home in New Jersey.
Yeah.
But as God's will, what happens after that? January 6th. New
Mhm.
Jersey sends 750 people to DC. Sergeant Major's got to go down there. So I'm doing that. It was crazy. And then I said to the commander after that was all over, we got back from DC in May.
Mhm.
And I said, "Sir, October 31st, October 30th is my last day. I'm done. I'm tapping out." That's the story. So
And if you hadn't, you'd have been the division sergeant. You'd be doing some crazy.
ironically, I would have been deployed. My unit just got back from Syria. They literally
Oh,
landed yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
I'm sure your family's glad you stayed.
oh yeah, yeah. My sons are happy. Like they're like, Dad, you did so many years, and it's kind of weird having you home, right? Because now I had to morph into a different guy. I'm
What was
not
that
so
like?
big. It was hard, man. The transition from my life was always like 150 miles an hour with reckless abandon, right?
Mm.
And so, when you think about it, as a CSM, there was always something. Meaning, I was still a father, right? I mean, I found out my wife had breast cancer in the middle of my deployment,
Which deployment?
the Kosovo deployment. And I remember telling my commander, I'm like, listen, dude, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to tap out. I'm like, I got to go home to my wife, man. Like, I can't let my wife, go through this by herself. And he talked me off the ledge, and I met up with my wife, and my wife supported that and said, no, stay, finish. I'll be fine. And so I stayed. And but the thing is, like, as a sergeant major, man, like I had a hard time going to bed at night, you know, knowing that there was things that these young troops need, right? Work was never done.
Yeah.
So I really didn't do a lot of self-help, right? Like my check engine light was on, but I just kept going. Like, I never had days where I could just go off the net by myself, right? And just kind of like, you know, I'm dealing with active duty folks, international folks, my own folks, and everybody's got different needs, right? And everybody has a different set of circumstances. So, the NATO mission, the troops got to do a lot of cool stuff, but it was never a time where there wasn't a pressing issue that needed to be addressed by the command.
Yeah.
You know what I
It
mean?
was on fire.
Yeah, and like the responsibility of being a deputy director of a three-letter agency in New York City, tons of pressure, tons of pressure. Um, and then on top of that, man, being the dad, being here for your kids and being here for your wife, and making sure you checked all the boxes with your family. And like I said, all too often, that check engine light was on for about 2.5, 3 years. I never took it to a mechanic to get fixed. I just kept driving on, hoping that it'll go off eventually. And now it's off.
Off.
It's off.
Did you have to do anything to turn it off, or it just kind of naturally dissipated when you got out? All that stress disappeared, and
Yeah, I think one of the things about anybody in the military, right, is like you have a passion, right? Like it's a passion. Like, you take pride in putting on your uniform. I did anyway, right? I would always like say to myself, like when I was getting dressed in the morning, I'd look at myself in the mirror before I'd go out the door, and especially as a CSM, right? And I was like, we got to win today. Today's got to be a win, right? No matter what. And you don't always get good news, right? Like at the top, you're dealing with everybody's issues, right? So, hey, sorry, Major, this guy got alcohol. Hey, sorry, Major, this guy did this, and she did this, and she did that. And, here I am talking to commander off the ledge, hey, sir, we can't be doing this. Oh shit, I got to call my son. He's got homework. Like he's prepping for the SATs, man. I got to get on the phone. And, 2 hours passes by and you're like, I missed it. I missed it. And you kind of like live with that. But then, like, when I got out, it took a lot for me to, one of the great examples, I smoked. Patrick could tell you, I was a smoker, and very few people in the Army smoke nowadays, especially at that rank. You don't usually see that, right?
yeah,
I did, but when I came home, I had to stop. I'd be on my porch at 3:30 in the morning thinking of like, I gotta do shit. Like, what about these guys? Like I gotta do something. What do I gotta do? What do I gotta do? And I went and talked to somebody and they said, Scott, chill.
yeah.
And I did. I learned how to turn the TV off, so to speak, right? And kind of like collect my thoughts. Started reading. I started really getting into like not spirit, just being mentally fit,
Yeah.
right? And then I bought a camper, and my wife and I and the kids packed up and we went camping.
That's
You know?
awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to find a hobby, right? And it's got to be you got to you got to like say to yourself, I have time. That's like people that don't go to the gym. The number one excuse is I don't have time.
Yeah.
And then you realize, no, you had all the time in the world. You just didn't want to do it. Like you
Yeah.
didn't take that 30 minutes to do it, right? There's people who spend 4 or 5 hours a day on their cell phone, but they don't have time to go to the gym.
Can you I know you shared it with me before we started recording, but can you tell me what you did to make up for some time with your son? That's a good
Well,
story.
it was kind of funny. Like I said, I became the high school security guard, right? And I was with him every day. So he's a senior in high school, man. Good looking kid, football player, lacrosse player. You know, his dad's in school, you know, and I show up at his classroom and I peek my head in and the bell would ring. I'm like, hey, buddy, you know, after he wants to walk with his friends, and I'm walking down the hallway, his friends are laughing. You know, he loved it though. After about a week, he was enamored by it, right? Like he thought it was cool. His dad was at the school, right? Um, and then ironically, like it was crazy, right? My oldest son winds up with AML and gets leukemia.
Mhm.
And everything was just stop, drop, and roll at that point, right? Like my wife just got done with breast cancer. I'm
Yeah.
done with the army. My wife's, you know, she still wasn't cancer free, so to speak. So, and then I get a call from my oldest kid, who's, you know, at the time 26, just married, you know, like, hey, dad, man, you know, I got cancer. I said, what are you talking about? He's like, I got cancer. That humbled me, man. Yeah, I wanted to die right then and there. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. But I was like a coach with him for the entire time, right? So, you know, through the chemo, we were there, and through, you know, we had to be there for everything, even though we was married, right? He's our son. My wife and I went through like 2 years, like where he was at Sloan Kettering in New York City. I had to live with him at the Hope Lodge in New York City, and till he got better. And you know, thank God he did. You know, he survived it, but that brought the family even closer, right? So I was there for that. So, you know, I'm blessed to be there. You know what I mean? I had no other responsibilities. Like
Absolutely. As a father, your responsibility, it's
think
sacred,
about it.
right?
Right. Well, you know, I got a pension from the guard, right? Like, so I have that pension, and I have a pension from the government. And so, like, I didn't have to stress about like losing time at work and not getting paid to pay my bills.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm at the hospital with my kid every day.
Yeah.
That was my job, right? So, spend time with him at the hospital all day long. And, you know, at the time, it was really difficult because of all that COVID shit. So, only one of us could be at the hospital at a time. So my wife would go, his
That's
wife would
insane.
go. There were days I couldn't see him because like his wife would go, and you know, I can't tell mom she ain't gonna go see her kid, right?
Mhm.
So I had to hold everything else down. So I, you know, I was home with my young guy, and but it's God's will, man. I believe that we all have a path, right? We all have a cross to carry, and I was fortunate enough to have those things. You know what I mean? Like at a time when it was convenient for me. I mean, I was retired, and
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's ever a convenient time to have a wife suffering through breast cancer and a son going through leukemia, but if there were a time and there were a dude to do it, it sounds like you're the guy.
no, I mean, I didn't mean it like that. I meant like, you know, like listen, there's people like suicide. Like when we talk about army suicide, right?
Mhm.
I truly, truly believe there's so many things that like people um they go through. So you know, the PTSD is a huge part of it, right? But managing their lives, right? Like, you know, some guys they get out, man, and they realize that like there's nothing out here for them. Like we've never developed them to have other skills, right? All they know is getting up in the morning and going out. When you're not part of that anymore, and your dudes, your battle buddies don't call you no more, and you're not in touch with people, you know, you could see how that plays mind games with people. Like, a great example is like when I was in Kosovo, a lot of people didn't know this, but I don't know if I ever told Patrick this, but we had a medical unit. It was I had a whole hospital, and we had a woman there, a major, and she was a mental health lady. And I said, look, I'm coming in this hospital like every Friday, but every Friday I'm coming into your room. And I'm a loud guy, so like people are gonna know I'm at the hospital. And I'm literally gonna tell people like, hey, oh shoot, I got an appointment and I gotta go to the hospital, right? And so I did it for about 3 weeks, man. And my operations sergeant major came up to me. He's like, Sergeant Major, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go talk to mental health, man. I got an appointment with mental health. And he was like, you're okay, Sergeant Major? And I was like, yeah, I'm good, I'm good. I literally would go in her office and talk to her about like the Super Bowl, whatever. I,
Mm.
I didn't have problems. Like I did. I talked to her about my wife's breast cancer for a little bit, but it wasn't like that was really stressing me out. The purpose of that was I want these younger soldiers to see a sergeant major, not afraid to say, hey, I'm going to mental health. Hey, I have an appointment and I encourage you to go if there's issues, right? Don't wait till there's a problem, right? When you start having these feelings of anxiety, you miss your family, you do this, it's okay to go. You shouldn't be shunned for going. You should be applauded. And I had the lady come up to me at the end of the deployment, and she was like, that was kind of like a brilliant strategy. She's like, because people started coming up. And
Mm.
she's like, so I had to like monitor how many appointments I had, and she said, believe it or not, she goes, I think that played a role in more people coming because you were so open about it. And I would say to them, like, we got people from all walks of life that come into the military with it. Everybody's got a story and everybody's got a different set of circumstances, right? And but leaders aren't trained really to like be empathetic
No.
in the military. And that's something that I learned along the way that you had to be empathetic, right? Like you have to know where you came from and never forget that. And then think about like what do you want your legacy to be? Did I want to be an asshole? No. I wanted to be like a guy where if I was walking through the fob or I was walking through the camp, somebody can come up to me, hey, Sergeant Major, can I talk to you for 5 minutes? Yeah, sure, no problem. So what can I do for you? I mean, Patrick could tell you this. Like, there's people that'll tell you, I literally would go to the chow hall and sit in the middle of the chow hall every night with the commander.
Mhm.
And I would say, look, man, we're gonna pull two people, we're gonna make them sit at the table with us out of nowhere. And they're not gonna like it, but we're gonna talk to them and get their story. And we did. We would do that every once in a while. And our relationship with the troops, I thought, was really good. Command climate surveys came back, they were good. Um, and people seemed to enjoy themselves. So to me, that was a victory. You know,
Sounds like a victory. It's, empathy is a rare quality, especially for senior leaders to be
yeah.
exercising.
What training do we get in that? Think about it. You go to training for everything else, man, but nobody could tell you how to be empathetic. Like, how to like like me, if I would have went somewhere and said, hey man, like my wife's got breast cancer and she just called me, got a Red Cross message and I gotta leave, you know, the old days people would have been like, suck it up, kid. You know what I mean? Like she's gonna be what stage is it? Stage one?
Yeah. Ah.
Get back on the line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Some kid comes to me and tells me, hey, this is going on. I'm in there going to the commander, look, man, we could lose this kid. You know what I mean? Like this kid could go home and be with his loved one. We we need him, but we don't need him that bad.
Sure.
And we could definitely maybe get a replacement for him. You know what I mean? And the commander is like, "Is that what you want to do?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I want to do." Commander be like, "So be it." So I was lucky to have that in the commander.
Yeah. Well, it's probably based on you guys' one-on-one relationship, right? You guys' your rapport with him that you got to build. The commander trusts you. Hey, if you
Yeah,
advise that we send some dude home, he's gonna
yeah,
listen.
I think he trusted me because, like, I told him all I wanted. Look, all I wanted as a sergeant major was to be fair across the board, right? All too often, sometimes there's penalties for they and not the, like
Yeah.
two different groups, officers and enlisted, right? Like, and I said to him, "Look, we're not playing this game. Everything's going to be equal. I don't care if it's a spec, I was going to date myself. I don't care if it's a PFC, you know what I mean? Or it's an O2. If you violate this is going to be the standard. So think really hard before we dish out punishments. You know what I mean? Um, and most of the time it was just, talking to people and they realize their mistakes and then you drive on. But he was a great commander. He was. We had an awesome relationship and we did not know each other prior to this.
Mm.
So that was the cool part.
Well, Scott, I'm gonna start winding us down. Got a few
Absolutely.
more questions though.
Yeah.
I guess looking back at 30 plus years, do you have any regrets in the Army?
I think you always do, right? No matter who you are. Um, I think I regret kind of not being more mature when I was at that E5, E6 level, right? Like I think I could have made more of an impact as an NCO, as a non-commissioned officer, right? Like had I been more mature about just things in general, like I was more like laissez-faire, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and you know, that was probably a time where I could have really like influenced maybe some more people, right? Been more of an influence on them. I think I kind of grew up when I was more of like an E7, E8-ish guy, kind of.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's probably like one of my only regrets about the military. I mean, I loved everything about it. Like I loved like meeting new people, training. I love, there was good times and bad times, just like anything else. But I kind of regret that. And there were some things even as a sergeant major that I think I could have done better. And when I was retiring, I was kind of like, man, I really could have shaped this if I started it a little earlier. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
but I think you have to pick like the top three things you want to do and accomplish, right, in your career. And I surpassed that by, well, I mean, I just wanted to be an E5, and I'm wound up an E9. So
Yeah. Yeah. I remember wanting the same thing. If I just make it D5, I'll be all right.
everybody, right? I'm like, who we kidding? But I think the oath of an NCO is kind of important, right? And I emphasized that on my last deployment with all these people. I actually held an NCO induction ceremony, and there were people that were part of it. And these are regular Army guys that came up to me afterwards, and they're like, "Sorry, Major, I've never even seen anything like this. Like this." And I was like, "That's just it." You know what I mean? Like we can't lose focus on what this really is supposed to mean for you as an individual, right? Like it's an
Mhm.
accomplishment. You're coming to the core now. Um, and really you're charged. You have a duty. And a lot of people I feel should take it more seriously, right? So
I think you're right. Responsibility is it's not a sexy term, especially now, right? Everyone wants less.
yeah, I think everybody's enamored by the money and the power, but they don't want the responsibility,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I don't know if you'd agree with that, but that's how I see it sometimes, even at
I,
work.
I absolutely agree. I don't know how pervasive it is, but almost every promotion I go to or every time I see a a buddy of mine that's getting promoted or whatever, I'll talk to him. I'm like, hey man, just reminding you, this is not extra power. This is extra responsibility.
Yeah.
Act accordingly.
I mean, I don't think people realize sometimes the consequences, right, of poor leadership. Because when it happens, then everybody's looking for empathy then, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh my God, I could have done this. Oh, I'm so sorry that, well, it's why we do things the way we do them in the army, right? Like everybody agrees that like sometimes when we do training, people are like, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? We do it all the time, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, hey, man, listen, take it seriously. Go to the range and try to be the best you can be every day because you never know when you're going to need that skill or you're going to go to, what is it, CLS, Combat Lifesaver?
Mhm.
Yeah, man, like pay attention because you may have to do that one day. You might save somebody's life, you know?
I've seen that play out in real life. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Even at work, man, in the real world, like, I worked the streets my whole entire career. I worked the street my entire career up until I retired. I was 55.
mhm.
I was going out every morning making arrests, and I would look at these young kids and like, what are you doing? Oh man, I watched the game last night. Look, get in the car, get out of here. I don't even want you near me. Because I would tell guys like, this is not a joke, man. Like people are out there trying to hurt us. You need to be at your optimal when you're out there at 5:30 in the morning, breaking down doors or making arrests. Some kids just think it's a joke.
You had, I'll end on this. You had one thing maybe that you wish your younger self had known. What would it be?
It's a really good question. Really good question.
And a lot of guys have, well, to be more mature. That's one, right? We talked about being an E5, E6, wanting to be more mature, being able to affect people's lives more positively sooner. I think a lot of times, I don't know if there's a specific age group or when you start getting out of the army and you start looking for purpose outside the military. Um, a lot of dudes that I talk to find it important important enough to remember that like all the military, the jobs, your government job, whatever it is, your daily job, it's not going to replace your kids. It's not going to replace your wife. Um,
Yeah,
and that stuff's way more important. So when you get the option to choose between, your family and the army, know that you can only choose the army so many times before that other one closes.
yeah. I think I could have, an 8 and 19-year-old Scott doesn't realize that like he's gonna be a 30-year-old Scott in the army, you know what I mean, with like kids and like an obligation and what that obligation really means, right? And like what it entails,
Mm-hmm.
and the demands of that, right? So, I do wish that I could have probably managed my time, right? Managed expectations and time, but also, um, and I don't know if I'm the only guy that feels this way, right? But I had so many opportunities in the military and in the civilian world to set myself up for the afterlife because, like, everybody has this dream that you're going to retire and you're going to buy a boat, you're going to be on the ocean, or you're going to be flying here to go to Europe for 30-day vacations, and that's not really reality, right? It's not reality because, like, you have kids, you have, maybe a mortgage, you have college bills. Like, I told my kids, you're not going to go into debt. So college is on me. You've used my GI Bill and now the rest is on me. As a father, those are the things you want to do. But I think I would have maybe been more fiscally responsible when I was younger, right? And maybe more educated on financial planning for my future retirement. I'm doing good. I'm just saying, like,
You get that 10 grand bonus to go to Hawaii again. You'd have done something different.
yeah, I'm investing it.
Yeah.
I might have taken $1,000 and put 9,000 in and maybe bought maybe a little bit of Bitcoin or an Apple stock or Nike stock or something like that, right? I'm just, in today's world, like like as leaders, right? Like nobody wants to micromanage their troops. But like, even in Kosovo, we set up financial literacy courses for people because like they were on deployment. How much money you spending? How much money you sending home? Are you going to be able to pay off your bills? Are you? And I think young people like the young Scott Mechkowski's at 25, 26 years old, we didn't worry about that because that 50 something year guy, it seems so far away, right?
Not
And
my
then,
problem.
right. And now you wake up and you're like, man, if I would have done this,
Yeah.
a great example. One thing I could talk to you about is like, the thrift savings plan, like traditional Roth IRAs, right? When I was a young kid and I first started, some old guy came up to me and said, "Hey, man, come here." He called me Gomer Pyle. He was a guy. He's like, "Hey, come here, Gomer Pyle." And he says, "I want you to take your paycheck and you're going to write this down. You're going to take out 15% of your paycheck and you're going to put it into this TSP. The government's going to match you dollar for dollar on the first 5% and 50 cents to the dollar on the rest, right?" And I'm like, yeah, yeah. Well, listen, man, 15% of $29,000. Like that was my starting salary, right? I already had a house. I had to pay a mortgage. Like, and so I did it. And my first paycheck, man, my wife she went through the ceiling, man. She was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't know. Okay, we're gonna do something." Um, but the funny part is I never changed it, right? And I always kept like if I got a promotion, I took the percentage, whatever the percentage was, and I upped it, I maxed out, kept it max, right? And then all of a sudden now I'm retired and I can't touch my money. And everybody's like, "Why aren't you withdrawing it?" And I'm like, because I'm getting a military pension and a government pension. If I start drawing from this, right, I'm going to be in a way different uh
Tax bracket.
right? And I'm going to get taxed on it. It's going to crush me. And then I went to this guy. He goes, "Well, why didn't you pay the tax up front?" And I said, "Because at freaking 21 years old, man, I didn't think, I didn't think I'd have a military pension, and I didn't think I'd have a government pension. Like I don't know what to tell you. I'm an idiot." He goes, "Did you have a financial planner?" And I'm like, "Yeah, some old guy. He's retired now, right?"
Yeah. So,
So,
dude,
yeah. So things like that, man. That's my only regrets. You know, I've made a lot of apologies for things that I've done. Look, man, I wouldn't say that I was the best leader ever. You know what I mean? I'm not like some icon, right? I'm a regular guy, man, from a regular upbringing, man, who just wanted to do regular things. And I was lucky enough to achieve them, through God's grace and some hard work and actual sacrifice.
I think that's probably a good place to end it, Scott.
Yeah. I really, really enjoyed this, man. It's like you're easy to talk to.
Thanks. Yeah, it was good to talk to you too. I'm sure Pat will reach out and maybe we'll have you on again.
Oh man, I'd love it, man. Listen, I mean, if you pick a topic, man, I'm anything you want to talk about. I just don't like talking about myself sometimes, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I hear you, but we needed to get through it. That's a good story.
Well, I appreciate it, man, for everything, and thank you for doing what you do, man, and I look forward to a follow up if need be.
Absolutely, Scott.